It's 5 o'clock. I'm Mark Austin. This is the News Hour. 60 minutes of news, analysis and interviews. We begin right now with the top stories this hour.
Well, on the eve of polling day, the third and final YouGov MRP poll that we're covering here on Sky News has just been released. Labour could have the biggest majority for a single party since, get this, 1832. I'm Sophy Ridge, live in Westminster. Our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, is here with me. There is loads of data dropping right now, and we will take you through it all.
Also ahead on the News Hour, the party leaders make a final plea for votes on the last day of campaigning. Biden on the edge as pressure grows. The White House denies a report that the president is weighing up whether to stay in the race. Hurricane Beryl barrels towards Jamaica after battering islands in the East Caribbean. The ex-DUP leader Sir Geoffrey Donaldson to face trial over 18 sex offence allegations. And Mark Cavendish sprints to a record-breaking 35th stage win at the Tour de France. First this evening, let's take you straight to Westminster for those findings of that YouGov MRP poll for Sky News. Here's Sophy Ridge and our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates.
Mark, thank you so much. Well, here we are. It's the moment. It's time now for Sky News' third and final poll-based projection by YouGov of this election campaign. And I don't want to delay any longer because we can now reveal that based on this data, here we go, Labour is on course for a landslide majority tomorrow with a majority of, get this, 212 seats. Now, that would be the biggest majority for any single party since 1832. It would break a series of electoral records. So that there, the 212 seats, that's the main headline, but there is loads more data that is being released right now that our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, has been going through all the data. You can take us through the key headlines because, Sam, that is the number that the Conservatives did not want to see on the eve of polling day.
That's right, Sophie. This is it. 212 seats majority. That is the projection that YouGov are making about Thursday's general election. And as Sophie says, we are on course to break so many records if this projection turns out to be anything like the result that we get on Friday morning when the votes have been counted. It's bigger, this majority, than anything we've seen in this century and in the last century. You have to go back to the 19th century to see anything like this before. And it suggests, that number suggests, that Rishi Sunak's gamble has failed. The supermajority argument has failed. Look at the history here. You have to go back to 1832 when there was a majority of 224. The Conservatives weren't even in existence. You had the Whig Party and the Prime Minister was the Earl Grey. Look at more recent comparisons. This is where this projected majority would fit. Keir Starmer in 2024 with 212. Now look at more recent precedents. Exactly 100 years ago, there was a Conservative majority under Stanley Baldwin of 210. The massive Blair majorities, really, these are the majorities, huge landslide majorities of our lifetime, Sophie, 179, 167 in 1997 and 2001. Nothing like the 212 that we could see on Friday morning, and then one in 1895 of 153. So you could see the scale of the majority compared to history when it comes to comparing it against single-party victories in elections. Let's go through the numbers in some detail. Right, let's look at the next slide. Now, it's important to say this is a projection. And with any projection, particularly importantly on the one on the eve of a poll, there's a range of uncertainty. There's a margin of error. So the projection, central projection, is 212 seats for the majority. That could be, it could, under these numbers, with this margin of error, mean a majority of something as large as 282 seats, which would be extraordinary. But it could mean a majority as little as 132 seats. Now, I say the words as little as. That is still a stonking majority that would give Sir Keir Starmer complete command of the House of Commons and seemed unimaginable in 2020 when he became leader. It has to be said that there are about 89 seats that are very close to call. So bear that in mind. There is quite a lot of uncertainty in this projection, but all of it All of it. Even the least optimistic end for Labour is a pretty good result for Keir Starmer and a disaster for that man there, Rishi Sunak. Right, let's look at the next slide. And this tells you what the House of Commons is going to look like. And I have to say, there are lots more records being broken. Labour would be on 431 seats. That's the biggest in their history. It's up 202 since Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn fought out the 2019 general election. Let's look at another record being broken. This man, Rishi Sunak, will have taken the Conservatives down to 102 seats. Again, that is the lowest on record, below the previous, quite considerably below the previous Tory low, which came when John Major fought the 1997 election. And look, they've lost 263 seats compared to 2019 when Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn fought that election. Pretty bad night. For John Swinney of the SNP, they would go down to 18 seats, which is down 30 from 2019. Look at this, a new high for the Greens. They double their seats to 2, up 1 from 2019. Let me give you some more records. Look at this. One of the big faces of the campaign, Sir Edward Davey, and wow, up 61 seats to 72. That is, by my reckoning, about double the wildest dreams of this man last September when he held his party conference. So an incredible result for Ed Davey. Lots of nerves in the Lib Dems about this figure, but clearly YouGov doubling down, and they think an incredible night for the Lib Dems. It would easily take them back to being the third biggest party in British politics. And this man, another person who has been a face of the campaign, Nigel Farage. Now, he would get 3 seats, and that would mean Nigel Farage being elected, it would mean Richard Tice being elected, and it would mean the Great Yarmouth seat going to Reform. It's a new party. It's hard for new parties to make any progress at all, so he will be pretty pleased just winning his Clacton seat. Right, let's look at some of the numbers that underlie this. And here they are. In fact, this is the range. This is the uncertainty that I was talking about, except in terms of seats. So Keir Starmer could have 466 seats at the upper end, 391 at the lower. And look at this. At the worst end of the projection, within the margin of error of YouGov's projection, the Tories under Rishi Sunak could get down into double digits, 78 seats. So you can see just how much uncertainty there is, but it could be even worse than we're saying. The SNP could go down to 8, could be as high as 34. You could see the Greens getting up to 4 seats. Let's just look over the other side so we can see how they do. Ed Davey could be as high as 87, could be as low as 57. Either way, that's record-breaking for that man. Nigel Farage between 0 and 14, although 3 seats is their central projection. Right, let's look at the next slide, and you can see some of the impacts of the campaign. Now, we've done these polling projections for you all the way through the campaign in order to find out how the campaign has changed the way that people have voted. Because Rishi Sunak took a gamble. Early election. Has it worked? I mean, goodness, look at this. This is the number of seats that the Conservatives have dropped just in the course of this election, 38. Labour have gone up 9. The Lib Dems have done very well. They've got up 24. SNP up 1 and Reform up 3. So those are the changes since the start of the election campaign. And you can see basically this election campaign with D-Day, with the gambling scandal, has been a disaster for Rishi Sunak. Right, let's look at the next slide. And here it comes. There you have the opening conclusions. You have the highest number of seats for the Conservatives since records begun, for the Labour since records begun. The lowest number of seats for the Conservatives since records begun. 212 majority is the central projection by YouGov for Thursday's general election. You have to go back into the 19th century to the Great Reform Act in order to find anything as big as that. And I just want to give you one more little bit of data before we pause. Look at this. All of that majority, that incredible record-breaking feat for the Labour Party is all happening on the Labour Party coming in at under 40% of the vote. There you can see they do have an advantage over the Conservatives. Conservatives actually have clawed back a tiny bit since the start of the campaign. They're on 22%. But that is really fascinating. The main parties, actually the proportion of people voting for them is right down, and you do have effectively people voting in all the right places in order to give Labour that incredible number of seats, and that is some of the maths underlying this election. And I just will give you one more thing. Look at this. Remember, Ed Davey has seats in the 60s. Nigel Farage has 3. Yet, only 12% of the vote is going to Liberal Democrats, and 15% of the vote is going to Reform. And that means that the quirks of our electoral system, first past the post, doesn't mean that the proportion of people that vote turns out in the proportion of seats that you get. It's a quirk system. Both these men actually want to change it. But you can see it's an unusual election. It'll confound political scientists. And YouGov are calling the House of Commons as a decisive majority for this man based on these numbers that don't actually show the Labour Party with that high a share of the vote.
Well, I'll be talking to YouGov in just a moment, who are really, I guess, kind of sticking their neck out with these projections. But a couple of things, Sam. I guess my first thought on this, extraordinary results. It's been quite consistent for Labour throughout this election campaign, and that, I guess, is going to concern the Conservative Party, who are going to be looking for, the only poll that matters is the one that happens on polling day. But the leads have been very consistent. The MRP projections, which feel quite new and fresh for this election cycle, have been pretty consistent in projecting these huge, stonking Labour majorities.
That's right. The Conservatives have tried tactic after tactic after tactic to shake things up. There were big, bold promises in the manifesto in order to try and attract people back to the Tories, like national service and all sorts of tax breaks. They have tried to make people nervous about the impact of a Labour government. You'll notice all of the most recent warnings that President Putin in Russia might favour a Labour victory. There are warnings over tax, that in the end taxes will go up under a Labour government. None of them have made a difference. Labour have run a very cautious campaign by contrast, and you saw their numbers go up and the Tory numbers drop right down.
Now, I'm very aware that we've been throwing an awful lot of numbers at you, so I just want to throw you a few headlines, just to kind of recap, if you like, to take a breath and to show the central messages from this MRP. So, as Sam has just been explaining, we are predicting through YouGov the biggest single-party majority since 1832, which that wasn't before the Conservative Party even existed, just to put that in context. Labour expected to have a whopping 431 seats, the highest total ever under Keir Starmer. The Conservatives would be collapsing in this projection to their worst ever result, even worse than 1997. 16 cabinet ministers defeated, including Jeremy Hunt and Grant Shapps as well. One quick thought from you, Sam, because I do want to bring in YouGov's Patrick English. It feels to me like the Conservatives, I don't know what you think, are becoming increasingly jittery towards the end of this campaign about what is happening with the Lib Dems. It feels like losing seats to Labour was slightly baked in, but it's the kind of seats in the Blue Wall and the South West that could kind of tip this into one of their worst ever results.
The Conservatives always knew that Labour was going to run a cautious campaign, but I think what has shocked them has been both what the Liberal Democrats have done, Ed Davey over there, not on a water slide this time, and also Reform. The big gamble by going early was to wrong-foot Reform, while Reform look under these results to have wrong-footed the Tories. And the Liberal Democrats, well, I've heard Tory campaign figures saying, look, he's done a good job. He's done a good job of catching people's eyes, catching a voter's eye, the voting eye, and having simple, single messages about social care, NHS and Reform. And that has all drained support yet further away from an election where the single driving factor appears to be, Sophy, people wanting to get rid of the Tories in enormous numbers in whatever way they can to give you that 212 majority for Labour.
We're going to have more from Sam later, but just to kind of recap, it has been an extraordinary campaign, and this, I've got to say, is an extraordinary projection. If it's right, we are on the cusp of a truly historic election result, a record-breaking election result, one that could potentially go down in history. Now, the man, I hate to say this, Patrick, YouGov's Director of Political Analytics, Patrick English, you're sticking your neck out here because if this happens, it would be truly astonishing.
It certainly would be, and we've spoken to almost 48,000 people. In fact, we've spoken to around 150,000 people over the course of the campaign to produce our 3 MRP estimates of what we think the House of Commons will look like after polling day, and this is our final call. I think it's been quite stable, really. We've been quite surprised in a way that our first MRP projection showed a similar result to this one. Between 3 and 2, we've seen an increase for Labour of 6 seats, a decrease for the Conservatives of 6, but overall, the story has remained consistent. And as you guys have been touching on, it's not just about these 2 men or these 2 parties. It's about the Liberal Democrats, it's about Reform UK, it's about the Greens. The Conservative vote, the 2019 coalition, which propelled Boris Johnson to that majority, is fragmenting. And it's fragmenting in all kinds of different directions, and that's how we get to this result with Labour on under 40% of the vote, but sweeping through the House of Commons.
How much should we trust the MRP? Because it feels quite new. Lots of people listening will be like, what on earth is an MRP to start off with? And we've been very careful, and you've been very careful to say that these are central projections. There's a margin of error. It could be less, it could be more. How much should we trust the central projection?
Absolutely. This is a huge change election, and we used MRP successfully in 2017 to correctly anticipate that Theresa May would lose her majority. But there we were talking about changes of 30, 40 seats. What we're seeing before us now is something which has never happened in British political history. And there are no guides really for us to look toward to see what kind of election result we should expect. So we are in a realm of great uncertainty. We believe and we think that by speaking to 48,000 voters, by using these advanced statistical techniques, that we can get the closest that we possibly can, given the data we have, to how this will fall out. But of course, it's polling, it's subject to margins of error. And we think anything could be possible in terms of something which looks a lot like 1997 to an even bigger Labour figure. So other pollsters as well are going beyond what we're saying. And we think that is very possible too. There is even a scenario in the projections that we've put out today where this man, Ed Davey, is leader of the opposition. That could happen.
So the second biggest party. What
Absolutely.
You're saying is Lib Dems getting more seats than the Conservatives.
It's within the intervals of what we've published today.
I have to say, you're saying that, look, we could see a 1997 majority or even bigger. I mean, it feels crazy that you're even saying that because I guess, Keir Starmer, the guy behind you, he'd have bitten your hand off for a 97 majority at the beginning of the campaign. He
would have. The worst result since 1935 is what Labour suffered in 2019. In one electoral cycle, we think if this does happen tomorrow, they're going to go from that to a record-breaking majority. It is unprecedented, and that's why there's so much uncertainty, and that's why we're so keen to express a lot of things could happen. We have our central estimates, and of course, we're going to be judged by those, but we must say there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of things could happen. There's still 89 seats that we're projecting with a margin of less than 5%, so statistically, they could go either way. So a lot is still happening.
I guess my other kind of thought is the projections are that Keir Starmer is on course for a record-breaking majority, the most successful ever Labour leader. How much do you feel that result is about, I guess, a kind of positive vote for the Labour Party or actually just a determination from voters to get rid of the Conservatives, however the best route to doing that is?
All the data we study and all the conversations we have with the public suggests it's very much the latter. And that is why I think we see such a fragmentation of votes going to all different parties. 15% for Reform UK, Ed Davey on the Liberal Democrats on 72 seats. It's about voters really calling time on the Conservatives after 14 years and calling time on this Conservative government. Some of them are going to Labour, some to Lib Dems, some to Reform. And it depends really geographically. We're seeing a lot of tactical voting. A lot of Labour supporters potentially lending their votes to Liberal Democrats to defeat the Conservatives in the south. In the Midlands, we're seeing really high voter efficiency for Labour. So the British public, it seems, have made up their mind. They want rid of the Conservatives. It's not so much that they're thrilled with the alternatives. Keir Starmer's ratings and Labour's ratings are quite average, but they are miles better than the Conservatives. And the British voters have quite simply decided that they've had enough of him.
And just a quick thought from you on the Scottish National Party, because you're projecting, it should be said, it's almost like we're kind of forgetting about this story amidst the decimation of the Conservative Party. But you're projecting a bad night for the SNP.
We are, yes. We believe that they will be below 20 seats. We think that Labour will return to be the largest party in Scotland again. And that is seismic. That is something which we've sort of seen coming a little bit in some of the projections that we've seen in some of the results that we've been looking at sort of in the councils up in Scotland. But it would be a momentous occasion, really, for the Labour Party. Something for Anna Sarwar to celebrate, for Keir Starmer to celebrate. And as you say, kind of get lost in the headline story. But again, Scotland has the highest concentration of marginal seats of any any area in the country. It's really difficult to predict. So many constituencies up there decided by mere hundreds of votes. So our intervals for the SNP, for instance, are anything from 8 to 34. So they could well still remain the largest party in Scotland after tomorrow, but we think our central estimate is that that will change and Labour will take that mantle again.
I applaud you for sticking your neck out this close to an election. You know, it's not easy to do so close to the election campaign. How confident are you?
I'm fairly confident, but anything can happen.
Yeah, it's true. And you've been very careful in saying that they're sort of central estimates, and of course, people's views can change. I'm always fascinated by the number of people who say they just make their mind up just in the polling booth as well, right?
Absolutely. There's a lot of uncertainty still out there, a lot of voters still to make up their minds.
Patrick English, thank you so much, and thanks as well for having all of these MRPs with us here on Sky News throughout the campaign.
Pleasure.
Absolutely fascinating stuff. So Patrick there talking through some of the data. He looked pretty confident, didn't he? Of course, really emphasising the margin of error. But what it does look like is that the Labour Party is on track for a record-breaking majority, or if not a record-breaking majority, the kind of majority that Keir Starmer will slip in his back pocket and say, thank you very much, that'll do me nicely for the next 5 years.
That's right, Sophie. Look, Rishi Sunak bet the farm when he called that early election towards the end of May. Let's be honest, YouGov are betting the farm as well, with extraordinary record-breaking figures like that 212 majority. And it matters to them commercially, apart from anything else. They've got to get it right or nearly right. So it's a big moment for them as well. There's already been reaction to this figure, I have to say. I'm not going to take any phone calls this time. But one Tory candidate has just said that actually they think it could be even worse. They say, I'll bite your hand off for that result.
So they'll bite their hand off for
that result.
The worst ever Conservative Party result.
There are some fears that it'll be even worse than that. I know people who are advising the Tory campaign who think that it will be a double-digit number of Conservative MPs returned. That's within YouGov's margin of error. It could go down to the late 70s. But my goodness, if it's even worse than this, we are in an extinction level event. I think we can now look at some faces because politics is about people.
I'm going to step out so you can have a look at all of the.
Right, let's look at this enormous sweep. There are 16 cabinet ministers who are standing this election, because remember, quite a lot of them, like Michael Gove, are standing down. 16 standing cabinet ministers projected to lose their seat. I want you to look at all of these faces because you might not be seeing them in the front line of British politics for much longer. Michelle Donaldson, she's a new one in this polling projection. She's projected to lose to the Lib Dems by 7 points. She's the Science Secretary. Esther McVey, Minister for Common Sense, she could lose by 5 points. This name here, my goodness. Richard Holden is the Conservative Party chairman. He was a North East MP. He actually did a chicken run, as it's known. He transferred seats down to Essex, to Basildon and Billericay. He could lose to Reform. Lucy Fraser, the Culture Secretary. Michael Tomlinson, one of the immigration ministers who sits in Parliament. And look at this. Still there with an almost impregnable advantage for the Lib Dems. Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, he's projected to lose by 23 points. There seems very little chance this man will be returning, nor this man, Grant Shapps. He's going to lose to Labour if anything like this turns out to be true on election day. Defence Secretary Welwyn Hatfield, Gillian Keegan, the Education Secretary, Mark Harper, the Transport Secretary, a leadership contender, just like Grant Shapps, Penny Mordaunt. She could lose in Portsmouth North to Labour by 6 points. Look at this, Alex Chalk could lose to the Dems by 35 points in Cheltenham. The Chief Whip, who would be key in ensuring some kind of discipline in a new Parliament, well, he won't be there. If the Nationalists in Wales, Plaid Cymru, defeat him by 9 points, the Welsh Secretary would be out in Wales. The Work and Pension Secretary, a familiar face on our screens because he's on the telly almost every other day, because I'm told not every Cabinet Minister wants to do broadcast interviews to defend the government. Johnny Mercer, the Veterans Minister, and Victoria Prentice, who Rishi Sunak saw just yesterday in Banbury. She could lose to Labour by 7 points. She said it was still looking OK on the doorstep. This doesn't look so much. So you look at all these faces, because you might not be seeing them for that much longer. Right, let's look at the next slide. And these are the well-known Conservatives who could go. And I want you to draw your attention to this man. Craig Williams, you've been hearing about him. He was tarred with the gambling scandal. He admitted putting a bet on the election date just days before it was called. Steve Baker, well, he was talking to Sophy just a few days ago, throwing his hat on the ring and complaining about the campaign. No wonder he's complaining. He could lose to Labour by 23 points in Wickham. Robert Jenrick, another leadership contender, he could be out. Miriam Kate, another one, she could be out. Jacob Rees-Mogg, a familiar face on the telly, as well as a former cabinet minister. And Ian Duncan Smith in Chingford, he could be out to Labour. Chris Philp, Greg Hands, Karen Bradley and Therese Coffey. All of them look like they could be out of Parliament despite standing again in this election. Look at these guys. They could be gone as quickly as Friday. Now let's look at the next slide. And here we have the map. Look at the map from 2019. An extraordinary result for British politics, an extraordinary result for Boris Johnson. Blue, 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 all the way down, including in the southeast and what once was the Red Wall. All of that won by the Conservatives, with the SNP utterly dominant in Scotland. Now, using the magic of technology, let's see what the MRP, the polling projection, looks like. Completely different. The darker the colour, the more likely to win. But you can see the Red Wall is back. Labour is back in Scotland across the central belt. The Liberal Democrats are back in the southwest. And really, what you can see is the Tory party is squeezed to just the south, southern England, eastern England, and some parts of basically southeast and a bit of central England and the home counties. And that is it. It's a huge change, Sophie. And I think that you just look at that map. Everybody thought that Boris Johnson could be in for a decade. It was a mountain of a result that Labour had to climb to overturn, but they look as if they're on the precipice of doing it. You know,
just looking at this map, Sam, but there's something that I guess I've just been thinking about, kind of playing over in my mind a little bit recently, because you can see it played out here. The Red Wall rebuilt, and it does feel like this campaign, and really the last kind of year or so, the Conservatives have been desperately focusing on this group of voters, shoring up the Red Wall, trying to keep hold of them. But by doing that, have they lost the Blue Wall? Have they let the Lib Dems back in? Have they let Labour back in some of these commuter belt towns? If they almost, I guess, by kind of gambling on trying to hang on to the Red Wall as much as possible, they've lost some of their core vote?
Boris Johnson put all of his firepower trying to keep those votes that he won for the first time in this part of the country. But look at it. That's not happening. I think you're right. I think that was at the expense of traditional Tory heartlands that turned, but now they've lost both of them. Look, I think there's one big picture that we need to take away. In decades gone past, people voted for a political party and stuck with that party for decades. What is quite clear from this is that that era is over. People thought that Boris Johnson's majority of 80 was impregnable. That's wrong. We're heading to break all the records on Thursday if this polling projection is anything like right. So records will be broken, but does that guarantee Keir Starmer a second term if this is the first one? Well, politics looks like it's these days built on sandcastles, and what is built can be washed away very, very quickly.
Yeah, because I guess this is the other thing as well, isn't it? Because if you look at this and you look at the size of the majority that we're projecting, 212, record-breaking, as you say, you would think that that is it. Keir Starmer is going to be master of all he surveys. Is there, I guess, any concern at all? And it feels almost ridiculous to be saying this on the kind of eve of an election result that might produce this, but is there any concern that, his support might be wide but shallow?
Well, here we have a result, 212 majority for Keir Starmer if this projection is right. But remember, my favourite fact of this campaign, they could be on course to get this result with 51% of the public saying to YouGov that they think Keir Starmer could be a bad Prime Minister. Half the public don't think he's any good, and yet we're going to break all records. Highest number of Labour seats, lowest number of Tory seats, the largest majority since the early 19th century, since the Great Reform, only beaten once since the Great Reform Act, and they still don't like him that much. My goodness, politics is fascinating.
It really is. Sam, thank you so much for sharing all these numbers with us and for taking us through all of these projections. As Sam was saying, fascinating stuff, because here we are on the eve of an election that by all accounts is going to be historic, it is going to be record-breaking. That is it from us. For now, I'll be back here on Sky News at 7 p.m. for the Politics Hub, where we're going to have lots more reaction to that poll on a busy evening for the party leaders on the eve of polling day. We'll see you then. For now, though, back to you, Mark.
Yeah, extraordinary stuff. Sophie, Sam, thank you very much indeed. So exactly 6 weeks after the Prime Minister announced the date of the general election, the final day of campaigning is coming to an end. Party leaders have been making a last dash across the UK in a push to get people out to vote. Rishi Sunak visited a primary school in Hampshire alongside Caroline Noakes, the Conservative candidate for Romsey and Southampton North. Mr Sunak has insisted he was still fighting hard for votes after Mel Stride, a loyal cabinet ally, said Labour was likely to win the largest majority any party had ever achieved.
No, every vote matters tomorrow. Just 130,000 people could change the outcome of this election. That's what the latest analysis shows. So if people want lower taxes, they want their pensions protected, and they want to prevent a Labour supermajority, there's only one thing to do tomorrow, and that's to vote Conservative. What Mel was doing was pointing out the dangers of a Labour government with an unchecked majority, a blank cheque to do what they want, and that means people's taxes are going to go up. It means they're going to pay tax on the state pension for the first time in our country's history. It means we'll make no progress on migration. So if you don't want those things to happen, if you want your taxes cut and our border secure and your pension protected, then you've got to vote Conservative to make those things happen and prevent that Labour supermajority.
Well, Keir Starmer has been rallying support for Labour in South Wales, telling supporters his party was not getting complacent.
We are fighting for every vote, and across the country there will be constituencies which will go down to the wire. And therefore we will continue to fight until 10 o'clock tomorrow night, making the case that change only happens if you vote for it. But it is a huge opportunity for our country. This is the opportunity to turn the page and to move forward.
The Liberal Democrats' campaign has mainly been the leader, Sir Ed Davey, performing stunt after stunt in an effort to get attention. Today was no different, really. Climbing aboard a tractor in Chippenham, Sir Ed claimed that the Lib Dems would sow a brighter future for the country, building a caring nation and moving on from the chaos of the Tories, he said.
I think people want to move on from Boris Johnson and Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak and all the damage they've done to our country. And they want to know what you're going to do in the future, how you're going to change our country, particularly how you're going to sort out NHS and care. And that's what Liberal Democrats are talking about. We want to make sure we build a caring nation where the importance of social care and family carers is really at the front. So we can both give them the support they need, but also transform our NHS at the same time by investing in care. And that's what people want to hear about, not the failures of the past under the Conservatives.
Now to other news, and the former DUP leader, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, and his wife, Lady Eleanor, will face a Crown Court trial over historical sex allegations. The pair appeared at Newry Magistrates Court for a committal hearing this morning. Our senior Ireland correspondent, David Blevins, was there.
Sir Geoffrey Donaldson faces 1 count of rape, 4 of gross indecency and 13 of indecent assault, a total of 18 charges. His wife, Lady Eleanor Donaldson, faces 5 charges, including aiding and abetting. The number of charges faced by each of the accused increased following a review of the evidence by the Public Prosecution Service for Northern Ireland. During a hearing that lasted less than 4 minutes this morning, a lawyer for the Public Prosecution Service said they believed there was a case to answer, and defence teams offered no counter-argument at this time. Sir Geoffrey, who's now 61, dressed in a navy suit and sporting a new beard, and his 58-year-old wife, Lady Eleanor, wearing a cream suit, were separated in the dock by prison staff. They stood very briefly during the hearing, simply to confirm their names, their dates of birth, and that they understood the charges against them. Asked if they had anything they wanted to say during this hearing, he replied not at this stage, and she simply replied no. The district judge, Eamon King, concluded that he was satisfied there was a prima facie case to answer, and having set September 10th as the date for an arraignment hearing when they're likely to have to enter pleas, he released the couple on continuing bail. Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, who was Northern Ireland's longest-serving MP, resigned as the leader of the Democratic Unionist Party back in April and was suspended from its membership. He's not a candidate in tomorrow's general election. From the outset, he has said he will strenuously contest all of the charges.
David Blevins there. The Democrat supporting New York Times is reporting this evening that President Biden has told a key ally he's weighing up whether to continue in the presidential race. The White House has flatly denied the claims. But after Mr. Biden's disastrous performance in last week's televised debate, the first elected Democrat has now called on the 81-year-old to withdraw. The Democratic Congressman Lloyd Doggett issued a statement that is what he said, recognising that unlike Trump, President Biden's first commitment has always been to our country, not himself. I am hopeful that he will make the painful and difficult decision to withdraw. I respectfully call on him to do so. Let's go live to Washington and our US correspondent, James Matthews. So this is interesting in the New York Times, James, essentially saying that Biden is weighing up whether to stay in the race.
Yeah, hi, Mark. He realises that he is in trouble. What he has told this unnamed ally, apparently, is that he recognises the next few days are critical. The next few engagements are pivotal in terms of his future. He has an interview on Friday with a US TV network, extended interview, long overdue in the mind of many who have said that he should have been out there taking questions from journalists in the 6 days since the debate. Indeed, there has been growing anger in Democratic ranks that the aftermath of the debate has been more damaging than the debate itself, because we have seen a president insulated from the media at large. He has made public appearances, but these have been stage managed to within an inch of his life. You know, a president by teleprompter, not taking any questions from journalists. So that grilling that he's due to be subjected to on Friday, very important, as are campaign visits to Virginia or Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. And he's told this ally that he recognises the importance, and that should they go badly, he may not be able to salvage his electoral chances. Voters, the voice of the voters will be key in all of this. And there's more bad news today for Biden, I can tell you. The Puck News website, it's got hold of a Democratic polling that indicates that states, battleground states that Biden previously had in his pocket, are now in play, now within reach of Donald Trump in the wake of that excruciating TV debate. So the voter's voice will be central to the considerations in particular. And of course, it's not just Biden, it is House representatives, people in the Senate from the Democratic Party who are looking to their president to deliver victory for them. They see weakness. They have not seen the kind of reassurance they've been after that leads them to believe he's fit for the job and leads them to believe that they will win their own electoral races. So there is a hard conversation, growing calls, Mark, not just in public, but also certainly privately, expressing deep concern about the future of Joe Biden, now clearly recognised by the man himself, a sense really of deepening crisis and serious questions around his future. It's the 4th of July weekend this weekend, so perhaps we won't see anything for the next 2-3 days. But as polls begin to come in, and as we see his performance in public over the next few days, then that may well be the test of how long he continues in post.
Yeah, the next week will be very interesting. James, thank you very much indeed. Hurricane Beryl is due to make landfall in Jamaica this evening. The Category 4 storm has already killed at least 6 people in the southeastern Caribbean, causing devastation on the islands it's already passed through. And we can be joined now, I think, by Martha Kellner, who is in Jamaica. And Martha, Well, these are very dangerous winds being predicted. It looks like it could make a direct hit on Jamaica very shortly.
Yeah, we're still around 2.5 hours away from this hurricane properly hitting Mark. As a result, the winds have not really picked up significantly yet, but you can see behind me the swelling of this sea has already begun, and it's the water that people are fearing most here, a potential storm surge of 15 to 20 feet, so at least double my height. And you can imagine just how devastating that would be for some of the coastal communities along Jamaica's south coast. You were mentioning the possibility of a direct hit on Jamaica. Jamaica's not had a direct hit from a hurricane for at least 3 decades. It does look, fortunately, like the island may escape a direct hit. Direct hit's considered when at least half of the storm's cone passes over land. So it may be fortunate to escape that. But even the outer bands of this monster storm could bring with it devastating winds up to around 140 miles per hour and that water that I was mentioning before. I've just been in a coastal community just west of here, a place called Hellshire Beach. Many of the people there were planning on waiting out the storm until the very last moment. They're worried about leaving their shops, restaurants, homes unattended because they're worried about potential looting. So that's something that they're having to weigh up. But they're scared, nervous. A lot of their families, younger children and women have already evacuated to some of the emergency evacuation shelters on higher land. But this is a storm that nobody is taking lightly. They've watched as it's wreaked havoc across the eastern Caribbean, even in Venezuela just over the past 12 to 24 hours. No direct hit on Venezuela, but still 3 people died because of the storm surge. So everyone taking necessary precautions here and just waiting to see really what happens, hoping that Hurricane Beryl is not as bad as the experts are predicting.
OK, Martha, thank you very much indeed. Now, earlier in the programme, we showed you pictures of the Prime Minister with Caroline Noakes, who's standing as a Conservative candidate in Romsey and Southampton North. And because we are obliged to, under election rules, here is a list of all the candidates standing in that constituency. You're watching the News Hour. Coming up, one final trip to Grimsby and Cleethorpes, the target towns we've been monitoring throughout the election campaign to see what voters think about tomorrow. And in sport, Andy Murray will team up with Emma Raducanu in the mixed doubles at Wimbledon.
Get the full story first. This election on Sky News.
We have a sensational team lined up for you in our virtual studio.
We're going to bring you all the breaking news.
We're not just going to be focusing on Westminster. We're going to look at the whole picture.
I will be showing you lots of the data, the analysis, breaking it down.
Sky News election coverage will go further. It will work harder.
What is our country going to look like after the election?
Of course, we'll bring the facts. We're also going to have some fun.
Seriously, people, you won't want to tune anywhere else. You get the full story first on Sky News.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Wall Street! High Street! Well, the plan seems to be to head to the police station where the policeman who fired the shots was based.
and everything, you know, his memories is all gone.
In almost every corner, this town has been completely destroyed by the fire. I've witnessed a remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too.
Trump out of the White House.
Is this the moment to reform gun laws?
You know, it's easy to go to politics.
But it's important. It's at the heart of the issue.
I get that that's where the media likes to go.
No, it's not. It's where many of the people we've talked to here like to go.
I report on the biggest stories from around the world. This is a town that is effectively encircled by the Russians.
You say it's all fabrication, what's happening in Bucha?
Destroyed my nation.
We take you to the heart of stories that shape our planet.
I can hear now quite a few explosions in the distance here in Jerusalem. A very violent series of confrontations here. What do you think of ISIS?
Everybody here knows the truth of ISIS.
Well, throughout this election campaign, we've been reporting from the key constituency of Grimsby and Cleethorpes. It may be a new seat, but it's right at the heart of the red wall that the Conservatives won over to secure the last election. And as such, it's high on both Labour and Tory target lists. Our national correspondent Tom Parmenter has been speaking to voters there one last time to see whether their opinions have changed over the past 6 weeks.
It's been a tough sell, this election campaign, and with just hours left to decide, some just haven't bought into it.
My view on it all is that neither party represent like an exciting future, and actually, to me, they're two wings of the same plane.
There's been a lot of talk about change. Do you feel...
How many years have we heard about change? How many years? I think we're stuffed. I honestly think we're screwed.
Azam sees a country that's really struggling.
I don't know who can bring it up. You need a magician with a wand to, you know what I mean, to turn it around. I don't know where that magician is going to come from.
You've not found that magician in the campaign this time?
No.
We've heard so much of that frustration in both Grimsby and Cleethorpes this year. These are towns that need an injection of optimism. But on the eve of polling day, where's the inspiration?
George doesn't see it. His family runs flower stalls at markets all over the country. Do you sense any optimism?
There's more worry than there is optimism. It's what's going to happen if Labour gets in. What changes are going to be made? Is it going to make us more financially stable? Is it going to put us further into debt?
When we started focusing on this battleground constituency back in March, we visited the cobbler's shop. Last time, Suzanne the seamstress told us it felt like the heart had been ripped out of the country. We returned to see how she's feeling about the future. So it's election eve. Have you got a bit of optimism?
The only thing we've got is that there's going to be a change. For better or for worse, we don't know yet, but there's going to be a change, so you've got to have a bit of hope and optimism.
If it is that change, what does it look like in your ideal world? What does it need to look like?
Well, community. They need to put something back into the communities, don't they? All over the country, everywhere. all shops are closing down and all the rest of it. They need to put some money back in and fund everything properly, and that way it'll bring it back up again.
She's clinging to that last shred of hope that these towns, this country, can move beyond this campaign and into something better. Tom Parmenter, Sky News, Cleethorpes.
Well, while Tom has been in Grimsby and Cleethorpes, our home editor, Jason Farrell, has been travelling across Britain with a parliamentary bench offering voters the chance to take a seat and tell us what's important to them. His final stop was at a biker festival in Stratford-upon-Avon.
We've tested the temperature in Cornwall, the direction of travel in Wales, the way the wind is blowing in Scotland. But in all the characters and opinions we've gathered, there's one demographic we nearly missed. Bikers. Welcome to the Adventure Bike Rider Festival in Warwickshire. Glastonbury on wheels.
What matters is that people actually read the manifestos and not just go for the headlines, and actually understand what it means and how the parties are actually going to achieve it, rather than saying, oh, we're going to do this great thing. Yes.
Have you scrolled through the manifestos?
I haven't.
Never mind, it was good advice. Everyone here shares the same passion, but when it comes to politics...
Who's appealing to you?
If I'm brutally honest, none of them whatsoever.
None of them?
None of them.
Very tempted to spoil my ballot.
I want to see a change. I think 14 years of conservatism, I think we all feel the same way.
I disagree. I'm not sure it's change. I don't think the Conservatives are Conservatives anymore. Taxes are going up, whoever's in power.
One Conservative message seems to be cutting through, not to give Labour a thumping majority.
I think I'm going to vote for Conservatives, and I think it's a tactical vote as much as anything, because I'm concerned about a massive Labour majority and the implications that might have.
I'm probably going to go Labour, and it's going to be a tactical vote, just to not be Tory.
There seems to be a lot of voting against parties, fewer people proud to vote for a party.
If I'm actually honest, I have already voted, and whilst I said I was going to spoil my paper, I couldn't bring myself to actually spoil it.
Do you go Tory?
I did.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm a shy Tory. Maybe I shouldn't
I think
put my
most
hand
Tories
up.
should be shy.
This will make pollsters shudder. How many shy Tories are out there?
Are you ashamed of the Tories?
I'm actually embarrassed about some of the things that our Prime Ministers have done in the last few years.
So what have we learned as we've dragged our bench across Britain? Everyone who sat on the bench has been asked the same opening question. What matters to you in this election? The most common answer, the cost of living. And one recurring word used by the first and last person to sit on this bench. What do you want most in the next government?
Integrity, I think is the one word answer.
You can't trust any of it. It just feels like there's a lack of integrity. And even when you're watching the debates, it's like a playground argument, and I struggle to take it seriously.
It's time to return our bench. Time for you to decide who gets a go on it next. Who's least likely to mess it up. Jason Farrell, Sky News.
A lovely series that from Jason Farrell there. Right, time for the sport with Julia.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
Can you please welcome a man with insights as sharp as a well-timed tackle, an 8-time Premier League winner, an England stalwart for 12 years.
Stalwart.
But a Valencia manager for only 4 months. It's the very bad boy, Gary, the treble, Neville!
Yes!
And his opponent, he's a Liverpool legend.
Oh, yeah.
And a Champions League winner.
Oh.
best ever.
It's the bruiser from Bootle, Jamie Istanbulzai Carragher!
Yes!
This round is a 9-dart challenge. You'll both throw 9 darts, and simply the highest score will win. So, 1 dart nearest the bullseye to decide who goes first.
Oh.
That's outside the 25.
Can you take that one out?
Leave it.
No.
We'll be here all day otherwise.
What are you doing?
That was over the hockey. You need to throw it again.
No, hang on, he's disqualified.
Stay
He can
behind
go
the-
first. He can go
No,
first.
he's behind
Ban
Rocky.
him, honestly. Go first. You're on. You're first.
It's off the board. 1. And 14 is 15.
That ain't going to be good enough, my friend.
Oh,
20.
we've played before.
Oh, no.
He went
Off the
so
board.
slow with Dad.
Oh,
it's 24.
24.
That's not good enough, that. Honestly, I'd let you off the hook there. I should put you away there.
4.
Ooh, not bad.
20.
Treble!
And treble 4. It's 36. So you're up to 51.
Why do you always panic? Oh,
Treble 12.
I was still walking back.
Treble 5.
Go away. Go away.
And a 20.
I'll put you to bed.
71.
Carry
It's
the
up to 95.
Carry the treble now. Put you
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Thanks very much indeed. Let's have a look at the weather. The rather cool and changeable weather will continue over the next few days, but there'll be some drier spells. Many places look fine this evening, but there'll be a scattering of showers, especially across northern Britain. Parts of eastern England will be rather dull and damp. Cloud and any lingering rain there will clear overnight, while showers become increasingly confined to the north. They'll be heavy in places, especially for western Scotland. It'll be cooler and windier than last night. Wales and central and southern England will be mainly dry tomorrow morning with plenty of sunshine. You're watching the News Hour. Coming up at 6, more on that final YouGov poll of this election campaign, which suggests Labour are on course for the largest majority since the early 19th century. It's 6 o'clock. I'm Mark Austin. This is the News Hour. 60 minutes of news, analysis and interviews. We begin right now with the top stories this hour. The party leaders make a final plea for votes as a final poll for Sky News suggests Keir Starmer will enjoy the biggest majority seen for nearly